An ordinary warder can be more important than the Commissioner of Prisons and even than the Minister of Justice. Because if you went to the Commissioner of Prisons or the Minister and you said, "Sir, it's very cold, I want 4 blankets," he's going to look at the regulations and he says, "No, the regulation says you can only have 3 blankets. 4 blankets, I can't. It's a violation of the regulations. And if I give you 4 blankets, I'll have to give others 4 blankets." But if you go to your warder in your section and you say, "Look, I want an extra blanket," if you treat him with respect, he'll just go to the storeroom, give you an extra blanket, and that's the end of it.
Since he's been out, he's phoned me on a few occasions, and he calls me James, and I call him Mr. Mandela.
Didn't it feel weird to you that you were the warder and he was the prisoner?
Not really. I think we understood each other too well, so it wasn't weird, He had no animosity towards me, and I had no animosity towards him, and the relations was very, very good. We would sit and talk hours, anything. He never tried to convert me to his politics, but, general things, news, what's happening and that. So there was a very good relationship between the two of us. There still is today.
How would you describe him as a person?
Mr. Mandela, since I've met him, till now, he's a perfect gentleman. That's all I can say about him.
He was one of the most refined warders, well-informed and courteous with everybody, soft-spoken, very good observations. I developed a lot of respect for him.
You. I'm talking to you, man. Look at me.
You have this main character, James Gregory, who arrives to Robben Island in the late 60s, and he's a warden, and he's a simple man with no education, and all he wants to do is to be the perfect warden. And he is trained by the most brutal forces in the apartheid system.
Your enemy is behind these walls, and you are at war with them. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Is that fucking clear?
Yes, sir!
When our story starts, he arrives to Robben Island with his family, and very soon he get this job as in the censorship office, and through that job he also comes in daily contact with Mandela. But what's so beautiful in the story is that throughout his meetings with Mandela, he slowly changed into something to the opposite of what he is in the beginning. And you can say that he becomes a living proof of all Mandela's ideas about human beings' ability to reform themselves. And I think that is the premises of the story, and that's the whole beauty of it.
Mandela, I have a question for you. You claim the ANC is not communist. The Freedom Charter says that the mineral wealth to banks and industry should be transferred to the people. That is communism, and don't try to bullshit me otherwise.
It is not. It is, in fact, true nationalism, where all the people, white, black, colored.
When I read the script, I fell in love with it immediately. I felt it was a really important story and an incredibly exciting chance for an actor. And essentially the character it goes through such a series of changes and goes on an extraordinary journey that spans 20 years. Through that journey, he really has to confront his conditioning and step outside of the sort of secure social boundaries of that time. He's really being stalked by his conscience, and it catches up with him. And I just thought it was a beautiful journey for the character and an actor. Pivotal aspect to James Gregory is this friendship he had when he was 7 or 8 years old with a young black boy, and that friendship at that time was probably quite rare, but it was for James Gregory the freedom that he would never experience again, and was very important to his life. In his private life, obviously, his children and his family are what's really important to him, and he would protect that over anything. But at times, he puts his job and his family on the line. He has an insatiable curiosity, which I think goes back to his friendship with this young boy, Bafana. Why is there a white minority rule over a black majority? And why is it that I'm being fed information, fearful information? All these questions that sort of bubble up slowly through the course of many years. And so whilst his family is deeply important to him, he does occasionally put them on the line, I think through his conscience gets the better of him. And at times sacrifices those people at the extent of sort of furthering his own knowledge. The way I looked at it or sort of felt like how I should begin this journey was really looking at a family and a man who wants to support his wife and his children, and he's got a job, he wants to make them happy, he wants to bring them onto this island where he works called Robben Island. It's got some desperate criminals on it, but it's a wonderful place in the safety of South Africa. There are a lot of struggles going on around Cape Town, so he could take them out of Cape Town, and 3 miles off the shores of Cape Town lives this island which seems idyllic. And it's simply a story about a man working in a prison, bringing up his children. Little does he know, by sheer coincidence, that he's going to be placed in charge of Madiba. And little does he know what confrontations he has to face. So it's a wonderful juxtaposition between his inner life and his private life, between his curiosity and his ignorance.
What freedom am I being offered when I may be arrested on a past offense? What freedom am I being offered to live my life as a family with my dear wife who remains in banishment in Bramford? What freedom am I
Speaks
being
very
offered
well, huh?
when I must ask for
Oh,
permission
quite you a
to
regular
live in an
terrorist.
urban area?
Hey.
What freedom am I being offered?
When I first read Goodbye Bafana, I immediately thought that Gloria was a great female character to play. You know, she's still alive, so that was a huge appeal to me, to play someone that had truly existed, that was a historical character. I thought that her character was very violent in many purposes in her life. You know, some of the scenes in the script I found very terrifyingly difficult to play, like telling my children that it was God's way that white and black should be separated.
Do we have a boss?
You don't need one.
Why not?
Because we're white.
But is that fair, Pa?
That's apartheid. It's the way we live, Natasha. Whites on one side, blacks on the other.
It's God's way, darling. Just like he doesn't put a sparrow with a swallow, or a goose with a duck, or a cow with a buck. It's just not natural. And we don't question God.
I found her character very difficult to relate to because of that. But on the other hand, I really wanted to try to understand the complexity of the times that she's lived in, the times she's grown up, and this amazing change that happened in her lifetime and her point of view changing. And so I thought it was a great arc of character to portray from someone that's very racist and then becomes a completely different person and has a completely different point of view.
I'm hoping you too. Please. Make a toast, Pa.
In New South Africa.
Meeting the real Gloria Gregory was a great inspiration for me because I thought that upon me, you know, by reading the script, I found that very challenging. How will I portray this woman who is so racist in the beginning, you know? I found that really, how can I relate to her? How can I make her, in a way, sympathetic so that an audience can relate to her as well and not just hate her, you know? And when I met her, that really, really helped me because she was such a warm person. And I could ask her all these questions that I needed to have answered in order to somehow make her likable, you know, in terms of, did she truly believe the things she said? Did she truly believe the things she taught her children in terms of black and white? Did she really believe that Mandela was a terrorist? You know, that he was what the government was trying to make everybody believe he was? And she said, yes, absolutely. You know, and that I couldn't understand. But she said, look, you know, first of all, they didn't have television until 1976. They didn't even know how Mandela looked like, which to me is kind of crazy to believe. And so I think she in a way represents a lot of people, white people that lived in South Africa in that time. And she was terrified of the movement of the ANC. She truly believed it was a threat to her security, to the security of her family. So in that way, they were ignorant, you know, they were. And on that level, I can relate to her.
This is Mr. Kruger, Minister of Prisons.
So how are you enjoying living on this island, Mandela?
Our cells are done. The food is not fit for human consumption. We are treated worse than common criminals. And you ask me, how am I enjoying it?
I have a proposition for you that could change all that.
What? One man, one vote, free and fair elections for all.
Mandela is Mandela, and what can you say about Mandela? I mean, he, for me, represents all his ideas is so extremely beautiful and powerful, and I would say that the biggest challenge in doing this film was to get Mandela right, because every human being on earth has a picture of Mandela. Everybody knows something about Mandela. Everybody has seen an image of Mandela, and they know how he talks and how his body language, and they know about his ideas. So to get that right was really, really a big challenge.
I believe he's one of the top 5 human beings in human history, because of what he did in South Africa, for South Africa, for over 27 years that he spent in prison. It's a pretty amazing man. I struggled a little bit early on with feelings of worthiness to play the role, but I trust Billy, and Billy trusts me, so I quickly got over that and just decided I was just going to do my best.
Leader Tuba Nelson.
Kupi Apa, Mr. Gregory.
Depose maximum security.
Did as much research as I could about Nelson himself. I listened to all his speeches, and I have some favorites. And I listened to everything, listened very closely. And he was a man that was not perfect in his speech. He would make mistakes. I thought that was very, human, and didn't make any bones about it. Didn't have any prompters, teleprompters, or anything else like that. Just gave his speeches basically from memory or what he wrote down.
I think for most actors to portray famous people they always find it very hard. And to portray Nelson Mandela, the biggest living celebrity, I think must be the biggest challenge for an actor to do. We gave the script to Dennis Haysbert, and I think after a day or so, we got the message back that he was very, very touched by the story, and he wanted to play Mandela. What I like about Dennis is he has the dignity, he has the authority. He's a big man, Nelson Mandela is a big man, and he's doing it very, very believable. But also, I mean, he's American, but to get Mandela's accent right and the body language and get the whole spirit of this character who spent 27 years of his life in prison and came out as such a serene, intelligent man was an enormous challenge, but I think really Dennis did a fantastic job.
There's Mr. Mandela, Mr. Nelson Mandela, a free man taking his first steps into a new South Africa.
Mr. Mandela! Mr. Mandela! I think Goodbye Bafana is a very important movie to make. Not only is it recent history, it just, it's just around the corner, really, what happened. But it also, to me, especially as a German, and it has, for some reason, a weird resonance, because I feel what happened in the history of my country, in a way, is very similar in terms of everyday, regular people living in a country, and they don't even realize what is happening right in front of their eyes.
It is? Look. Oh, cute. Look at the little kefir lover.
I'm not a kefir lover.
He's even got his arm around the little nigger.
That's
Have a kefir lover to me.
I'm going fishing. Brent, get your rod.
These people were, not all of these people were monsters, or they were, they had this hatred against black, or they were racist, because they weren't. They just grew up in this era, and they just believed it, and to me that is the most terrifying thing, to not teach people to think about outside the box and being passive about what is going on in your life. And movies like this show that we grow up all equally the same, and we are all the same people, no matter what color or religion we have, and that should be respected, because otherwise this could happen, and to me Bafana shows that very powerful, how one man, without violence, without ever showing hate towards the whites, although he was only shown hatred and had to live this life, this terrible life, and spent all these years in prison. He walked out tall of this and showed us, the white people who considered themselves to be so much more educated and better people, what one man can do by believing in the good of people, and I think that is very important.
Uma ufuna thina wozuzodelingane. Sesa ngobizizwe uma ufuna thina wozuzodelingane.
Bazohlala babhemu